In this video, I'll demonstrate how you can add domains on DigitalOcean, how you can create unlimited subdomains, and how you can host unlimited website on a single DigitalOcean droplet using Putty and FileZilla. With that, let's try to understand how you can host multiple websites on a single DigitalOcean droplet. If you don't have an account on DigitalOcean, you can use the link in the description. Using that, you can avail $100 credit. I'm making more such DigitalOcean server setup and configuration videos on YouTube. Please subscribe my channel so that you are updated when I'm uploading any such videos. Once you have successfully logged in to your DigitalOcean account, you'll be taken to a project creation page, or else you'll be redirected to a default one. Now you have the feasibility to add multiple other set of projects depending on your requirement. Now you use project to organize or cluster the set of resources for a particular client or particular project that you are having. Now for this case, we are trying to create a project that talks about our YouTube series for DigitalOcean. Here the resources are basically domain, droplet or databases that we are creating. This is the project overview page where you'll be able to see the set of resources you have added to this project. Now if you scroll down, you'll be able to see the set of services that they offer. Let it be setting up a load balancer or creating a managed database. Now if you see this blue button here that says get started with a droplet, that's basically creating your own server or else a droplet. You can avail the same link from here on top by clicking create, and the first item that you see is droplets. On clicking droplet, you'll be taken to a separate page where you'll be able to see all the set of options that you'll need to create a droplet. The first thing that you'll see here is choose an image, and under that you'll notice something called distributions. Now this is asking you which OS you need to be set or configured for your droplet. You can either choose Ubuntu, CentOS or anything of that sort, but we have few other options on top. If you notice, there's something called container distributions and marketplace. Marketplace is important if you have some project, let's say hosting a Django project or WordPress or else a PHP MyAdmin. You can simply click the predefined instance that is already available in marketplace. In this video, we'll try to configure domain and other set of things using a CLI version. If you are not comfortable with CLI and want a graphical user interface to work with, I have a different video where I've installed server management tool called Flask and demonstrated how you can go about adding multiple domains and host multiple websites. Please check the link. We will select Ubuntu distributions, and if you need to change the version, you can click on the arrow link, and that will open up all the set of versions that are currently available on DigitalOcean. Now we selected the latest one, but if you wish, you can choose any of the ones that are currently available. Now we have to select a plan, basically the server configurations that is required for our project. Now if you notice, they have multiple tabs: standard, general purpose, CPU optimized, memory optimized. Now that's they have clustered based on the server configurations. So depending on your requirement, you can choose either of these. Now along with the pricing, they have also specified what all they are providing for this particular plan. If you notice the $5 plan, which is basically a monthly plan, they are giving 1 GB memory, 25 GB SSD disk, basically the storage, and 1000 GB data transfer. You have to select the one which is best suited for your project requirement. If you have any doubt, please leave a comment. For this series, I'll be simply uploading few of the WordPress portals, some dummy development projects. So I don't need much of a resources. So I just opted for a $5 plan. But depending on whether you are going on a production or development, just choose whichever is best suited for your requirement. If you need extra storage to your droplet, you can add block storage so that the server configuration remains the same, but you're adding extra storage to it. Next thing is data center, and this is important. Data center is important because it relates to latency, which is linked to page speed or website performance. So you have to choose something which is close to your user base. It's less likely that you'll have user base from a single region, so you can use content delivery networks like Cloudflare or Akamai that will solve this particular problem. Let's say I'm selecting Bangalore for the time being. Next thing is asking you to select a VPC, or basically a virtual private cloud. You can leave it empty or else just select the default one which is available. You don't have to create a new VPC for the time being until and unless you have that bigger of a project. And there's two ways to access your droplet, one is using SSH keys, another using one-time password. One-time password is something we discussed in another video. In this, I'll try to show you how you can use SSH keys. Now that is important is because that this is more secure compared to a one-time password. And in this video, I'll show you two ways. One is adding a new SSH key. Second is how you can add on an existing droplet. For this, we'll use terminal on our Mac system, but if you're a Windows user, you can do the same operation using Putty. Firstly, we'll see it on a Windows system. If you're using Windows system, just Google Putty and you'll come to this downloadable page where you'll be able to download the package files. Now, either you can download the installer directly or download the executable files. I'll go ahead and download the entire zip, which consists of all the executable files. For this video, we'll be working with two of these executables. One is Putty Keygen and another is Putty. We will use Putty Keygen to generate a key that will add to our DigitalOcean account for this particular droplet so that we can access the droplet using SSH key. Now this is the normal view of this particular application, and you'll notice the generator button there. Leave the type to be RSA and you can leave the generated key bits to be 2048 as the default values. Click on generate and now you'll notice that it's asking you to hover on the empty area so that it can create an unique or random values. Hover your cursor on top of the empty area and just try to kind of move around your cursor so that it can generate an auto sequence or random sequence and create a hash key for your requirement. You will notice that the public key has been generated here on top, and you can directly copy this. And next thing that we'll have to do is enter the passphrase, or basically the password, which will come or be added to our private key. Just enter a password and re-enter or confirm the same. Once this is done, you can save the private key. So there's a button that says save private key. Click on it and store it safely somewhere, because using this we'll be able to access our Putty SSH terminal. If you want, you can also save the public key as well. For public key, you don't need to add any extensions. You just let it be a simple text file or just a normal file. Once that is done, you can copy the entire string that you have there or the public key that you have saved. You just copy whatever the content within it and follow the rest of the video. If you are on Mac system, type in ssh-keygen and then you'll notice it's asking where exactly you want to store this file. You can provide the file path that you want, and if you are giving a direct file path and not the folder path, it might or it will ask you whether to override the particular file. So if say I want to put it under downloads, and let's say I'm creating a new file with the name, let's say DigitalOcean, without any extension, and if I check the directory, let's say this is my entire directory, hit in SSH Keygen, copy the same directory. In case if you are giving the directory, it will create with the same name, ID, RSA under that, or else if you are giving it a name, that will create a file within the directory. If the file already exists, it will ask if to overwrite. Once that is done, it will ask you to add a passphrase, or basically a password, which will be used when you're trying to access this particular droplet using the private key. Enter a password and confirm the same. Once you have completed, you'll see a success screen something like this, where you'll be able to see the fingerprints and other bits. Along with that, it will also show you where exactly your files are located. So this is the private key that has been generated from this process. But we'll have to access the public key and copy the content of the public key to this section of the DigitalOcean account. So if I just ls, you'll notice that there's a private key which is added, and along with it there's a public key noted by .pub. Either you can go ahead and nano this, So this is a bit difficult for you to kind of copy. So you can simply go ahead and do a cat and the file name. So that will print all the values in your system terminal. So you have to copy the entire path along with the your system name. So to be on the safer side, just open it using your uh, editor, text editor. You have to copy the entire file content and not just the string and excluding the system name that is there. You have to copy the entire string including that and go ahead to the uh, SSH key area on DigitalOcean and paste the same. And so this is the public key that we are adding. For Windows user, you have to add the string that we discussed. For Mac, we have to do the same. Give it a name so that we can understand which SSH key to be used, and click on the add SSH key button. So you'll notice that the one that we have just added is applied. Either if you have multiple, you can give them the access. Now these are basically system specific, so your developers or your team members probably can give you their sort of SSH key and you can manage the same from the portal. So you can allocate who will have access to this particular droplet. You can change the host name, or depending on whether you want to give it some different name to make it more meaningful. For this case, I'm just giving it a random name so that you understand that this is something that you can customize. And you can provide a tag. That way, that's basically for organizing or clustering. You can select a project. For this case, we're selecting our UT project, and you can enable backup. Now this takes 20% of the droplet price, so it's fair for them to charge because it gives a backup of your entire droplet, and if something goes wrong, you can always get the snapshot and recreate that droplet. Now this process can take some time, but it's less than a minute or two. They will configure and set up your droplet. Once the droplet setup is complete, you'll receive an IP address assigned to your droplet. If you followed me so far, please like the video, that will help me. This is the droplet overview page. Here I'll give you a rough overview of what all you can perform in it. Left hand side you have all the links to specific pages, and the center you have the statistics and other sort of usage informations. So on the left hand side you'll notice something called access that gives you access to the terminal on the web portal, and you can reset your root password from here. You'll notice something called volumes. So if you are running out of space or storage on a droplet, you can add additional storage that they call it as volumes, or block storage. Next, you'll notice something called resize. So we created a plan where we selected $5 plan, but it's not limited. You can certainly go ahead and change as your project grows, or you want more resources within your droplet. You'll also notice something called backups. So if you haven't enabled the backup, you can enable the same from this page, and you'll see a list of backups that has been created. If it so happens that you are to delete your droplet, under destroy you'll see an option that says destroy droplet. Also you'll see an option that says rebuild droplet. Now here, let's say something goes wrong, or you probably install something and not working out, you'll probably want to reinstall or recreate the droplet. Instead of doing that, you can do a rebuild, and this turn on and off button kind of disables or stops the droplet. We'll now try to access the droplet on both Mac and Windows system. First, we'll try to do it using Mac terminal. For that, we'll access this particular one that's without an extension. We'll do ssh-add and the file name. You'll notice that there's a warning that says the file is too exposed or too open. To get rid of this, just give it a permission 600 and use the command chmod 600 and the file name. Once that is done, add or repeat the previous command that will ask you to enter the password, the passphrase that we added to our key while creating. Now you'll notice that it says identity has been added. Now you can do an SSH to this droplet by using SSH space the username. For this we are using root and the IP address @ IP address. Once you have clicked, it will ask you to store the fingerprint, and this is for one timer when you're trying to access this IP address with that username. Just enter yes, and you are within the system. So you'll notice that the identity has been permanently added, and this is basically the Ubuntu terminal that we have access to as a root user. We'll now try to see how we can access DigitalOcean Droplet using Putty on Windows system. Open Putty and you'll see this sort of screen. This is the default screen, and the first item that you see is the IP address. This IP address is basically the Droplet IP address you received, the IPv4 address. Copy that and paste it in the session log and ensure this is SSH button is enabled as the connection type. Now go down to the connection segment on the left hand side, and you'll notice something called SSH. Open that. Under SSH you'll notice auth, directly on auth, and here you'll see that we can access our private key. Click on browse and access the private key that we have generated and saved. Open that. Next thing, we can go to our session log, or else there's one more thing. So when we're doing or accessing our droplet, we will be asked to enter an username. If you don't want that to be repeated, you can enter the username using which you want to edit here. Go to session and you can save these particular configurations that we have added so far, so next time we don't have to kind of reconfigure every time that you want to use. Click on save, and that will save the item here. Double click to access the terminal. You'll notice that this is accessing the IP address, and now it's asking us to give the username. Give the username, probably the root. Now this is a secondary video I have added to this where I'm using the username silverFoxA. And you'll notice that it's asking you to enter the key phrase or the passphrase. The passphrase is the password that we added at the time of generating the SSH key. So enter the password that you have added while creating the key that you added or linked to this configuration. That's how you can access DigitalOcean Droplet using Putty on Windows system. You can now use the same command we're using on Mac terminal. It's not recommended to use root user for accessing DigitalOcean droplets. It's highly recommended that you create a sudo user with the root permissions and access the droplet using the same. For that, log into your DigitalOcean droplet as a root user for the time being and create a secondary sudo user. For that, we have to create a user first. So use the command that says add user and the username that you want to provide or have for this particular user. I'm giving my developer name as the username here, and once you add the username and hit enter, you'll notice that it's trying to create a user group and creating a directory for this particular user and configuring few of the files for the same. You will be asked to enter the password that you want for this user and confirm the same. Once you have confirmed the password, you'll be asked to enter a few of the basic information. If you want to skip, you can simply hit enter and skip all the information that you don't want to provide. Once you have filled in all the set of information or probably skipped for this matter, you'll be asked to confirm that these information that you have added are correct. You can hit Y and that should take care of it. So far we created a basic user which doesn't have a root permission. To provide it root permission, you have to use this command which says user mod with a flag and sudo permission, and provide the username to which you want to give this root permissions. For my case, I have added the new user as silverFoxA. For you, it will be different. So you just add in the username to which you want to provide these sudo permissions. Hit enter, and to verify the same, you can use the command that says su, basically super user, space the username. You'll notice that now you are logged in as silverFoxA, or probably the new user that you have added, and not the root user as a whole. So this is how you can create a pseudo user and not continue using the root user. If you want to log out or disconnect from the terminal, you can enter exit, and that will exit out of the current terminal. If you now try to access using this new user to your DigitalOcean droplet, you won't be allowed, is because we haven't configured the SSH for this particular user yet. So you'll notice that it's showing permission denied, and you certainly can't use the SSH key we used for our root user, because here is the same key you can't use for two different users until and unless you have specified to do the same. For this case, we used the DigitalOcean private key for a root user and not configured anything for our new user or new pseudo user that we have created, which is why you'll see even after adding that, we're not allowed or we're not permitted to access. We'll now try to add SSH key for this new user that we have created so that we can access the DigitalOcean Droplet using this new user. The same step will also work if you want to add SSH key to an existing droplet. To do that, we have to create a new SSH key, which we anyway discussed in previous part of this video for both Mac and Windows users. For Mac, you have to use the SSH Keygen command on terminal, and for Windows user, you have to use Putty Keygen executable file to generate a new key. Follow the same step we did in previous part, and that should give you a public key which we have to configure in this terminal. On completion of that step, we will receive a public key, which I showed you how we can get that. Copy the entire public key, and for one last time we have to log in to our DigitalOcean Droplet as a root user so that we can configure this SSH key for our new pseudo user or new user for that matter. Once you have logged in as a root user, switch to the super user that you have created using the command su space hyphen space and the username, or simply su space username. Then you will be accessing the terminal as pseudo user you have created. Now we'll be creating a directory, basically SSH directory under this user's web space. To do that, use this command and we'll give it a permission so that the required permissions are provided and available. And we'll now create a file under this particular directory, that is .ssh. This is a hidden directory. We'll add the SSH key, the public key that we generated for our new user. We'll copy that and paste it in this file. So this is basically authorized keys. Whatever keys we add to this file, they will be able to access this user using those set of keys. And apply this file permission so it's not too open. Exit from the current connection, and we'll now try to log in or access this droplet using the new user that we have created. Use the new private key file that you have generated and provide it with the permission that it needs on Mac. And for Windows, proceed with the same step that we used to access DigitalOcean Droplet. On Mac system, allow or add it to your SSH configuration by using this command ssh-add and the private key file path. Once that is done, use SSH username @ and the IP. So you'll notice that you have access to this droplet. For Windows user, you were just to use the username if you haven't configured auto login, which we discussed. So far we completed how we can access our DigitalOcean Droplet using a secondary pseudo user. Now if you try to access this IP address, you'll notice it says cannot connect to the server. It's because we haven't added a web server. You can either install Apache web server or Nginx web server. You'll notice that I don't have either of these installed. You can confirm that by typing in the command apache2 space -v or Nginx space -v. That basically shows the current version that is currently installed, if at all is installed. In this video, we'll talk about how we can install and configure Nginx, and we'll use Nginx web server to connect to our domain and configure the web hosting. If you want to know more about Apache 2, I already have a different video. I'll add the link in the description. Before we can proceed with installing our web server or any other operation, we have to update our Ubuntu system. For this, we have to use sudo. If you don't use sudo and simply go ahead and try to update your system, you will find an error that says you are not allowed. You basically will see a permission denied. So there are a lot of operations which are only permitted to a sudo user, which is why we created a secondary sudo user and not just a normal user. To perform the activity, type in sudo space su to either log in as a full-fledged sudo user, or else you can stay as silverfox or basically the normal sudo user and perform the activity using or prepending sudo to your commands. So if you're using sudo space su, you're basically logging in as a root user and r- accessing the root terminal from your own user terminal. So I'll try to show you how you can kind of use your user that you have created, the sudo user, but not log in as a root user. So you type in sudo space apt-get update. That will update your Ubuntu system and all other packages that are required or probably requires updation. Second thing that we'll do after updation is installing our web server, which is important. So we will use sudo space apt hyphen get or simply apt install nginx nginx. That can ask you for confirmation. Simply enter y. This process can take some time, and it will always install the latest stable version of nginx web server. Once it's successfully installed, you can verify or check the version of it by typing in the command nginx space -v. So you'll notice the current version when I'm creating this video is 1.17. And if you try to access the IP address now, you will see a default Nginx web page. After successfully installing your Nginx web server, depending on your project, you may have to install certain other dependencies. So let's say if you're trying to host a PHP project, so you have to install PHP FPM for your Nginx web server. To do that, you have to type in this command, that's sudo space apt install php-fpm. Now for Nginx, this is PHP FPM. For Apache, this is directly PHP. Now you'll notice that it's adding few other sort of dependencies along with the PHP 7.4 CLI version. Similarly, if you're hosting a Node.js project, you will need to install npm and node on your Ubuntu system. To do that, you can simply use the command sudo apt-get install npm, and that will install npm and node altogether. If you want to know more about this, I have already created a separate video where you can install Node.js application on Ubuntu system with pm2. This was just an overview. I have multiple other videos where I talked about how you can set up your projects. You can refer to that. Okay, we'll now try to add a domain to our DigitalOcean host. Now there are two important directories that I want you to kind of know clearly what it does. Now there's a directory that's called www directory under var and www. Now this is under the root directory, root user directory. Either you can use this or you can use your as in the user's home address. So if you are using as the new sudo user, you already have a home address assigned to it, right? Either you can use that to host your projects, or else you can host your projects in the www directory. Now there's another file path which is important, that is /etc/nginx/sites available. This is the place where we will add or create our site configurations, Nginx site configurations. Now this can look something like this. So there are a few configurations of server blocks that are added that says this domain needs to refer to this file path within the system, and you can configure SSL. You can also do reverse proxy and a lot of things in it. Now server configurations on Nginx is really important. If you don't understand how to deal with it, you can always go to nginxconfig.io. Here you can create server configuration blocks depending on your projects. So if you are hosting a Python project or PHP project, you can simply configure if you need reverse proxy to be enabled. So that bit you may not remember, or it might be difficult for you in the initial phases. So you can always refer to this portal, and that can give you, depending on your project's exact server configuration, which you can simply copy and paste on your Nginx portal. Now we'll try to change the A record, or we'll try to point our domain to this particular hosting or DigitalOcean droplet that we have created. For that, we have to go to the DigitalOcean portal and navigate to the section where it says networking. You can either find it from create button or else left hand side under manage you'll find networking. Here we'll try to create a domain. Basically, we'll add a domain which is already bought by you from a different service provider. Let's say it can be GoDaddy. For my case, I got it from GoDaddy, and I'll try to show you how you can navigate a domain from GoDaddy and link it to DigitalOcean. Now there's two ways using which you can link your domain to a hosting. One is by simply redirecting or changing the a record of the domain, and second is by changing the name server as a whole. So let's say this is the list of domain that I have on GoDaddy. I'll just pick one of these and click on DNS. That will bring me to this DNS management panel. Now the first type, you will notice that there's a type and the first one is a and denoted, and the name of that is at the rate. That's basically the a record which refers to the root, basically let's say the domain, primary domain, and the value there is parked. Now that's a default alias that GoDaddy provides, but this holds that particular value, or basically that says points to, is the IP address. So either you can give the IP address of the droplet if you don't want your domain to be navigated to your DigitalOcean name server. So either you can do this, by which you can simply maintain all your DNS records on GoDaddy but have your hosting on DigitalOcean. This is one approach. Second approach is, and if you try to log in or basically access your IP address, you'll be able to see whatever like using the domain, you'll be able to see whatever we have under that IP address, right? Now this is not the approach that we want to do using in this video. Instead, we'll go for the second approach, where we'll transfer or kind of migrate all the name server feasibility and give it to DigitalOcean to manage and maintain. So we'll change the name server on GoDaddy panel to DigitalOcean, so that DigitalOcean can manage and maintain all that. So we can create subdomains and other things on DigitalOcean, and we don't come back to our GoDaddy portal. That way it kinds of helps you, because all of your hosting resides on DigitalOcean and you can perform all of that activity there itself. So let's say you are using load balancers and other bits, so you will have to have the domain on DigitalOcean so that you can perform that activity. Okay, now on DigitalOcean, the domain name you have to add as a domain on DigitalOcean under networking and select the project. When you do that, a domain is created on DigitalOcean with the same domain name, and you will receive this NS records. The type NS equals to NS records, which you have to copy. So you'll notice there are three NS records that are there. You have to copy each one of those, and when you are copy pasting, you will notice that there's a full stop or dot appended to the name server. Ensure that you delete that. If you don't have so you basically add all three of those on whichever domain provider you are using and click on save. Once you save, you'll notice that your domain provider says your domain is not maintained by us now, it's currently maintained by other providers. So let's say for our case, it's showing the name servers has changed to DigitalOcean from GoDaddy. Now all the activities like creating a subdomain or creating a CNAME record like www, or pointing our domain to a hosting or as a different IP address, all that we can perform within our DigitalOcean domain panel. Now go back to your DigitalOcean domain overview page and create an A record that links to your or points to your DigitalOcean droplet where you want to host this domain, right? So for our case, we're just using our YouTube or DigitalOcean droplet. Either you can simply select the droplet that is displayed, or also put the IP address of the droplet that you have. Now leave TTL time, that's basically time to leave. You can leave that as is and hit create record. That will create your A record, and if you access your domain now, that basically points to the droplet, and this time it's not managed by GoDaddy but it's managed by DigitalOcean. So currently we are accessing our project using the domain wpifix.in. But let's say if you want to access it via www.wpifix.in, you have to create a CNAME record. Now CNAME record, under host name you have to add www, and you have to point it to, or basically an alias that will be at the rate. The at the rate defines the primary domain or root, basically wpifix for our case. Now if you access this www wpifix.in, you will be able to access your project. You can notice that this is accessed via www. Okay, now let's try to create our new server config on our Nginx web server so that we can access our website and use our own website files and new structure as a new file path. Now in this video I'll show you two ways using which you can upload your project to DigitalOcean web server. One is a normal basic way, that is using FileZilla. Second is more of a developer perspective or developer way and decent approach, which is using Git client. Go to the sites available directory under Nginx directory and copy the default server configurations, or if you are copying it from the Nginx config.io tool, do the same. Just create a new file and paste it there. But if you are copying it from there, just copy the default file and nano your server configurations that you have created. Scroll down and you'll notice that server block starts and it's listening to the port 80, and right next to it is given default server. There can be only one default server, so if you are keeping the default configurations on outside, you have to ensure there's no default server tag added to your port. But if you are deleting and disabling the other one, the default configuration, you are okay to keep the default server flag here. Now the root here says where exactly your files are located, as in project files. So we'll use our home file path for this server config so that I can show you, and we'll create two websites. So let's say I'm giving home silverFoxA and website 1 will use this server config, and we're saying server name basically tells you which IP or the which domain can access this particular server block. So this is basically a filter that says these are the domains or these are the IPs that can access this particular server block. Now location and this try files, depending on your project, you have to change. Now if you are hosting a PHP project, you have to uncomment this section. Once you are done, just save the files, and you will be required to create a symlink by using this command ln space hyphen s file path to the site's available directory and the server config space file path of sites enable, and give the same server config file name there. You'll notice that I haven't added a sudo here, which is why it's not allowing me, because this is a sudo operation. Just add in sudo if you're not if you get the same error there, and you can put in Nginx space hyphen t to check whether the configurations that you have added is correct. So you'll notice that it says syntax is okay. Obviously you are seeing some permission denied message, so if you just do a sudo nginx hyphen t, you'll see the correct message without all the permission denied. So that's basically says okay, the test is successful and everything is fine. So when you are going or changing some server configurations, it's a good practice that you do a server config test by using this command, and then you do a server restart. That way the project files will be reflected and there won't be much of a server downtime because you missed out something and other bits. Now navigate to the file path you have added in your server config. If the file path doesn't exist, go ahead and create the same file path that you have added there. For my case, I didn't have website 1 directory under home directory, so I had to create that. So I created two directory. One is website 1 and another is website 2. So for the first case, we'll work with website 1, where we'll simply be uploading a dummy website using FileZilla. Now that will be a static website. Start the FileZilla application on your system, and you'll notice the FileZilla application is segmented in multiple sections. So first, this section talks about or details or shows all the files that are listed on your server once you have connected to the server. We'll see how that works. This site is basically the file path within your local system. The first one is are the root layer, and once you click on one directory, all the content that are available will be shown on the secondary box. And this section here shows what all are the files that are being uploaded or basically queued or failed transferring or successfully transferred. Now we'll click on file and then we'll click on site manager, and if you have multiple sites you'll be able to see it there, or else if you want to create a new one, just click on new site. In the protocol section, select SFTP and login type as interactive on Mac system. For Windows, you have to select key file and select the private key file that you have added to your Putty system. Give the username that we assigned and copy the IP address from your DigitalOcean Droplet. Copy the IP address of the droplet and put it under host. You can give this particular background so that if you have multiple uh, sessions open, it can differentiate that, and click on connect. You'll notice that it's asking to accept the fingerprint. Click on OK, and this will connect to our DigitalOcean Droplet, and you'll notice that directory listing has been successful message shows up, and on the right hand side you will see the files that are hosted on our DigitalOcean Droplet are being listed. Now this is the website one directory where we want to upload our projects. I have downloaded a free Bootstrap theme from this portal, and they have quite a good amount of Bootstrap free themes available. Open the directory where you have your project files located. Now for my case, I just downloaded a zip file, and if I unzip the file, you'll notice that this is the folder that is available for me. So once I unzip, I get a total project folder. I'll show you in this video using that, but that's not the ideal approach. So let's say once I go inside this project folder, I have these assets where there are CSS files, JS files, image files, and basic HTML files and other bits. So what I should be doing here is not zipping or not kind of archiving the entire project. Rather, I go inside the project directory and zip the files within it. So you basically zip these files altogether and upload this archive or zip file to the directory you have created in your DigitalOcean Droplet. Go ahead, like you will have it zipped in a archive file, or else if you want, you can simply navigate to the project directory using this navigator section, and once you are within the place, on left hand side second box, you'll notice all the files against or available for your project are listed. So you can simply click all and then right click and click on uploads, so that will upload all the files. Now that way it's not really decent, cause it may take quite a good amount of time, and there can be some files that are not fully uploaded, and it can create conflict. So you might as well want to create a zip file out of the total projects which you want to upload, and simply push the zip file as a single file. That way you don't have to worry about which all are the files that didn't get uploaded. With a simple upload, you can host a normal static website, but if it's a dynamic website where it needs to be linked to a database, or you have vendor or node modules, so you have to use the terminal to install the dependencies. Now it's not decent for you to kind of zip your vendor directory or node modules directly using FileZilla. Now you'll notice that using FileZilla we couldn't extract the files, so we have to come to the terminal and install a package called unzip. To install that, simply copy this command, that's the sudo apt install unzip. It will install that unzipped application or the package on your DigitalOcean Droplet, and just unzip the directory that you have uploaded using the command on DigitalOcean Droplet. Type in the command unzip space and the file path to the zip folder. That will unzip all the files within the same place, and you'll notice that I didn't unzip the folder files as a single archive, rather I copied or I zipped the entire directory. Why, you may ask? The problem here is, if my file path doesn't match, if I say okay, my folder or my root should be within website 1, I simply can't have a secondary directory, and under that I can't have the files or website files. If that happens, my website won't work. So if you notice here, I have two options. Either I can change the root here and specify the secondary directory, or else I can move all the files whatever are there within this directory to website 1 parent directory. So I can simply move that. So you'll notice that I moved all the files that were there in the secondary files to website 1. If you refresh here, you'll be able to see all the files. Now you can go to basically check the website and refresh the page. You'll notice that the files that you have added, or the static website that you have added, is reflected. But before we can do that, we have to restart our Nginx web server so that the changes are reflected. Any activity related to the web server are required to have sudo permission. So just type in the command with sudo prepended. So that goes as sudo service nginx restart. And if you come down to the browser and refresh the page, you'll notice the website that you have uploaded is kind of reflected. And the same also works on the primary domain and on the CNAME that we have created, basically www website. So if you go to the other tab, so this is the primary domain, and if you go to the other tab, so that's using your www.wpifx.in, and that also refers to the same root, basically refers to the same project that you are hosting. Now you'll see this says not secure, so we haven't added any SSL to this. I have a different video, cause if I add it here, the video will get even more lengthier. So you can check the other video. I'll add the link in the description of this video. So this was the first approach, using FileZilla. As I said earlier, you can add multiple domains and host multiple websites on a single DigitalOcean droplet. If you have multiple other domains, you can follow the same step we did so far, and you can link it to your website. If you don't have multiple domains, you can utilize the concept of subdomains. So using a single domain, you can create unlimited subdomains and host as many websites as you want, as long as the droplet that you purchased has enough space and bandwidth available. To work on the second website, we'll create a subdomain. Now you can create unlimited subdomain using a single domain, so you basically have to create multiple A records. Now here I'm creating website 2, and it will be stated as website 2.wpifx.in, and it points to the same droplet. So you can basically host unlimited website using same droplet. Now if you go to the new domain that we have created, basically the new subdomain that we have created, you'll notice that it's showing the default page because we haven't configured any server config for this domain. The second approach towards hosting your website, instead of using FileZilla, is using Git client, or basically cloning your Git project on your DigitalOcean droplet or your hosting. Now you can do the same even on a shared hosting. I have a different video where I showed how you can do that on GoDaddy. Now let's say in this video, we'll try to create a simple project on GitHub. So there are multiple Git clients. There's GitHub, then there's Bitbucket. For this, we'll try to work with GitHub, and I'll create a simple HTML project on GitHub. It's not possible for me to show everything about GitHub or Git as a whole, so I'll just cover a rough overview of how you can clone a project on your DigitalOcean droplet. So let's say you have a simple website or simple repository created on GitHub or Bitbucket, and let's say that has a simple index.html file, and we'll just show a basic hello world project. So let's say we created a simple repository here on GitHub, and you'll notice a default readme file is added to it because we asked it to create a default readme file. We'll create another file named as index.html, which will have some basic text so that we can see, okay, this is working. We'll simply write something on the HTML page. It's not required that you have to do all the set of coding on GitHub portal. You can use their GitHub desktop application, so you can upload your local project that are hosted on your local system to GitHub using that GitHub desktop application. So let's say we commit the file. Now the best part of this is it can track all the changes that you make. So basic functionality of Git. So you just go through what Git and GitHub if you are not aware, and if you are aware of it, so most likely you know how it works. So let's say I committed this file or created this file, and if what I'll do is I'll try to clone this, but before we can clone this project, so let's say if you click on clone or download, you will get this URL. We'll copy this, and before we can set it up, we have to set up our Nginx server config. So we anyway created a separate configuration in previous part of this video. We'll do the same for this website as well, but before that, let's say we go to the website 2 directory and clone this project. So for that, we just have to use git space clone and the git URL that you received. Now you'll notice that I cloned everything within website 2, and if you do an ls, you'll notice all the files that we have hosted there are available in this, and if you do a git log, you'll be able to see the commits that you made. So it basically keeps track of what are the changes that you are making on your project, so that way it helps you going forward. You'll notice that when I cloned this project from GitHub using the git clone command, it created a separate directory within my website 2 directory. So we'll just delete that and clone it again and give it a name this time, and tell this guy where exactly it should save my files. So after the git URL, if you specify a name, let's say demo for this case, it will create a directory and clone all the projects files within the same directory that you have asked it to. So you'll notice that it created a demo directory, and if you go down to the file path, so this is my root or the home path, and we'll go down to our sites available directory so that we can create a new server config where we'll specify this as the root for our project, and give the new domain or new subdomain as our server name, so that for that particular server name, these are the files or these are the server configs that will be applied. So once you have copied or probably created a new server config, go down to the section, you leave the port as is and go down to the section that says root. Now this, as we discussed, this talks about where exactly are your files located or project files located. Now you have to give project file path. For projects like Laravel, there's a secondary path. Under project, there's a file folder called public. So you have to specify the public there. And we'll be adding the server name, basically the domain which will have access to this droplet, or sorry, this website project. You can have multiple domain as a server name for a single project, depending on your requirement. Save the file, and the same process, we have to go for a symlink, and this is a sudo permission which we have to provide. Once that is done, we have to restart our server again. This is a sudo activity, so you certainly can't just do the operation without a sudo prepended to it. Restart the server and go back to the website. If you refresh the website, basically the new one that you have added, you'll notice that whatever the files that you have added to our git portal are being reflected. Now you can go ahead and change the file, or basically make the changes on your local system and commit to a git server. And let's say for our case, we are simply adding a new text to it and saving the file. You can give it a commit, change, or like what all are the files that you have changed. Once you have committed your changes and pushed to the live git server, you can come to your server, as in DigitalOcean server, and log in as a user, and go to the file directory, and you can simply do a git pull. Depending on which branch you are working on, you can either go for a git pull origin master or git pull origin and the branch name. That will copy or basically pull all the new changes that you have uploaded to your origin server. If you refresh now, you'll notice whatever the changes that we made are being reflected. If you have any doubt, please leave a comment. Please like the video and subscribe my channel. That will help me and make me motivated to make more such videos so that I can help you in a fashion that I can.